I'll tell you this, guys. One of the reasons I'm kind of excited to go back, not that my other classes are bad, I enjoy all my classes, but one of the reasons in particular I'm kind of excited to go back is you guys are always, even through, I was telling, so I'm friends with Mr. Robinson. Okay, Mr. Robinson, you may not know him, he's not a STEM teacher, but I've worked with Mr. Robinson for many years, and he dropped by. I hadn't seen him in many, many months, and so he dropped by my house the other day, and we were talking, and I was saying how even though we're not in person, you know, I can just tell because of how you guys say good morning and interact with me in the chat and all that kind of thing. It's I can tell you're a good class. And that's fun. That's fun for me. I always appreciate that you guys drop a little hello in the chat in the morning time, and so I just wanted to say I appreciate it, and I hope that very soon we'll be in the classroom and you'll be able to say hello to me in person. You may be surprised when you first see me. I'm way uglier in person. But other than that, I am 6 feet 6 inches tall. I'm a pretty tall dude. So that may take you off guard a little bit, but yeah, it was either my career choices were teacher, basketball player, which was never going to happen because I have no athletic talent, or circus. So when we get in the classroom, you'll see I'll stand up and I'll be walking around lecturing and stuff like that. But let's talk a little bit about that. It's 9:15. Most of our students are in here. We're still waiting on a couple of folks. But I just wanted to let you know I told you we've had conversations about this before, but I told you that as soon as I got more information about this, I would kind of trickle it down the pipeline to you. So I was in a staff meeting yesterday with the new STEM director, Mrs. Schwelt, and she's very, very nice, and talked to us a little bit about her predictions of what's probably going to happen here coming up soon. And that is that she says that there's a strong likelihood that we could be going back in as soon as about a week or so. Probably around the 20th, the week before spring break. So if that's the case, the district will, I'm sure, let you know. My understanding is the way that the schedule will work is very similar to how it works now. Mondays and Wednesdays will be your odd classes. Tuesdays and Thursdays will be your even classes. And once every 2 weeks, whenever your cohort is, will be your day to show up at school. I brought up in this meeting the idea that I told you guys about, which is having it so that you guys just came to class every day, since we have a small class, and the classroom is plenty big enough to have everyone safely social distance and everything like that. So we don't have to worry about that side of things. But one thing that we do need to be mindful of is that I can't mandate you to show up every single day, even on days when it's not your cohort. What I am allowed to do is to do an open invite to you. And for anyone who wants to show up on any day that we are in the classroom, you are going to be welcome just for that class. And in particular, this works nicely for our class because I would love to have everyone in there every day. Teddy, that's a great question. They are still working on balancing out the cohorts. They have not finished that yet, and there are still a number of people who maybe transfer from other schools or whatever, who don't have a cohort yet. Now, I did get an answer on how you find your cohort. Your cohort may still change in the next week because they're still working to balance them out. But essentially, there's no easy way of doing that because the schedules just don't work quite that way. There's no way to get it to be even, exactly even for every single class. It just doesn't match up that way. So I don't think that they will be equal for our class in particular because of how small it is. I have another small class. My AP seminar class is also very small, and right now it would be literally a cohort of one for, I think, cohort D days. And so anyway, I don't, that seems ridiculous to me to just have literally one student that I would be teaching and then the rest of you I would teach. It's just kind of dumb. But so what I'm going to do basically is every day for my class, I'm just going to make it known every single day will be an open invite day where anyone who wants to show up to my class in the morning time and have a class, a proper class with more instructional minutes, better preparation, better teaching in the classroom is welcome to show up every single day for third period Euro, whether it's your cohort day or not. Now, obviously, on your cohort days, you're mandated to be there, okay? But on the non-cohort days, the other 3 days over the course of 2 weeks, you know, you are welcome. You are welcome at all times in my classroom. And so I just want to, and I'm looking forward to it. My hope is that you want to take advantage of that, but I do understand that there are transportation issues and other things like that that ultimately may prevent people from being able to do that. So how could we check our cohorts? That's right, I was going to mention that. Thanks, Teddy. So when you go on to Q, it's not immediately visible. There is somewhere on, you're going to have to search for it a little bit. There is somewhere on there a little like extension menu, like a plus sign or something like that. And it will be on Q, and you will be able to find it on there. But again, you know, keep checking it, because even if you checked it today, there's a chance it could change. All right, there is a chance it could change. So anyway. Any other questions on that? Okay. If there are no other questions, we are going to proceed with finishing out the age of real politics. So let me get this all situated here. I'm going to close that. I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to bring my PowerPoint back up. Move this a bit. You can see. Yeah, Evelyn, so a lot of people on their hippos, I was reading through the hippos the other day, and I just want to say, you know, I left comments on that because I think that some of you could be digging deeper and making more deliberate connections. Some of you guys in your analysis of the documents were very, very generic and broad. We want to avoid that. We want to dig into the document. We want to be emphasizing and analyzing the document and its significance. The point of view, like for example, a lot of the point of view had to do with like, oh, this is what is bad. Okay, let me tell you what does not work for point of view. Point of view can't be, oh, the point of view of this historian is that he's a historian and he wants to teach people about history. That's not a point of view. You have to be thinking about their point of view on the topic that they're talking about, okay? That's how point of view works. You need to discern what is their point of view, how does it fit into the greater story that you understand about the event that they're talking about, all right? So for a lot of you, you got dinged on your hippo this last time, or 2 times ago, for the revolutions of 1848 one, because as I was reading them, I'm like, that's not good enough. You need more. And a lot of you too kind of, I think, rushed through it just to get it done. Don't do that either. Take your time on it. Okay, dissect the document. That's what you're going to have to do when you take the AP exam. The faster you get at dissecting it, the better. But don't just blow through the assignment without really thinking about it or providing a proper analysis, because that's not going to work for you when you take the AP test. Evelyn, did you have another question about that, or does that pretty much answer your question? Okay, well, we left off talking about German unification, and so the thing that finally brings in those southern German states that had previously not been included in the German Empire, they join after the Franco-Prussian War. Answers, but do you think we could go over it one day in class, like an example? Of course, yes. Yeah. Let's save that for a day when I have a little bit more time. But it's not that, you got to understand, Evelyn, there's not a single right answer. It's not just like a math problem where 2 + 2 is 4, and if you answer something other than 4, it's wrong. Okay? That's not really how you need to be thinking about it. There are many, many right answers. Each of them, though, are contingent on analysis. And that's what I'm saying is, as long as you're analyzing the document and digging into it rather than just talking about it on a surface level. The other thing is, don't quote the documents. And I've said that many, many, many times to you guys now, but never ever quote the documents. Analyze the documents. Don't just tell me what the document says. I can read it, and so can the AP graders. You need to tell me what's significant about the document in your own words, okay? Think about the documents that I give you for these HIPPO assignments as though they're DBQ documents. You need to use them in a historical argument, all right? And that's the thing is, there's many ways to use these documents in a historical argument properly. But the only way to do it properly is to do it with depth, analysis, specificity, okay? These kinds of things. Many, many answers can get the point, but you will not get the point if you don't go into detail, all right, in your own words. All right, talking about the proclamation of the German Empire on 18th of January 1871, Germany now became the most powerful military nation in Europe. Wilhelm I, previously who was King of Prussia, became the Emperor of Germany. He takes on the title Kaiser, which actually is it's the root, the etymology of that word goes back to the word Caesar from the Roman Empire. Very similar to the word Tsar, actually, which also goes back to the word Caesar. But Kaiser Wilhelm I, so he is the Emperor of Germany. Bismarck, Otto von Bismarck, also remains in power. He became the Imperial Chancellor of Germany. And the German Empire's government was essentially the same structure as it had been established after the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. In reality, with this new German Empire, the Reichstag had very little power. There is a German parliament. The Reichstag has parliamentary members, but it has very little power because the German Empire basically becomes this conservative autocracy, where just like in absolutist times, the nobility was allied with the monarch and held most of the power in the German government during these years. Talking about the Austro-Hungarian Empire just a little bit here. After the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, where Germany defeats Austria, the Austrian government begins having to address national aspirations of its ethnic groups. Remember that because Austria-Hungary had such a diverse population of people living in it, that there are a lot of people who feel very underrepresented by the Austrian government, who is largely German. The largest and most resentful group was the Hungarians, but also the Czechs start to push for self-determination as well. Or for at least a semi-autonomous state where Czechs were able to handle their own affairs without the interference of the German Austrians. The reason that this starts happening after the Austro-Prussian War is because Austria's defeat signaled that it was not going to be able to put down these nationalistic aspirations of these ethnic groups the way that it had in 1848. Austria's defeat by Germany in 1866 weakened its grip on power and forced it to make a compromise and establish what became known as the dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary. And this is something that we talked about before. It was sometimes called the compromise. In German, it's known as the Ausgleich. Sorry, excuse me. But the Ausgleich, I can't think of a more German word than Ausgleich. It's just fun to yell, all right? Or Compromise of 1867. And what this did was it officially created the Austro-Hungarian Empire, meaning that the Habsburg Empire was essentially divided into two major pieces of jurisdiction, one under the control of the Germans, one under the control of the Hungarians. But they are still allied with one another in kind of a dual monarchy where they are both still part of the overall same political entity, but now instead of it being completely dominated by the Austrians, it's kind of split in two and half dominated by Austrians, half dominated by the Hungarians. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to startle anyone's dogs. Okay, the Hungarians now had their own assembly, they have their own cabinet, they have their own administrative system, and they would support and participate with Austria in terms of things having to do with colonies or the imperial army or the imperial government, things like that. But the Hungarians are, of course, very happy with this development because never before in history had they been recognized as their own kind of semi-autonomous entity. And so here you can see the divisions of the Austro-Hungarian Empire after the Ausgleich. The pink areas were to be administered by Austria. The green areas were to be administered by Hungary. The yellow area is an area known as Bosnia-Herzegovina, and that one was jointly administered by both because that was a new acquisition that had only recently been taken over by Austria-Hungary, and so they split the responsibilities of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Now, what I want to mention to you is that although the Hungarians are very happy about the outcome of the Ausgleich, there are still no less another 6 to 8 different ethnic groups who feel underrepresented and resentful towards both the Austrians and the Hungarians as this new Austro-Hungarian Empire gets underway. If we take a look, we can see Ukrainians, and in particular the Romanians in the orange areas that Hungary controlled, became very resentful of the Hungarians over, in particular, the use of language that they were going to use in schools, but also, the Croatians, okay, the Croats and the Serbs were very resentful of both the Austrians and the Hungarians for being underrepresented by both monarchies. So, this dual monarchy thing is going to be putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound of nationalist sentiment that is going to get much, much worse as the decades continue to progress into the start of the 20th century, the 1900s, and the beginning of World War I. Managing the empire. Okay, government was not integrated due to differences among these ethnic groups. In particular, the language used in school was a very divisive issue. For example, if you look up here in these light blue areas in what is at the time known as Bohemia, today known as the Czech Republic, okay, there was a whole bunch of people living in the Czech regions here who spoke Czech, were of Czech descent, culturally were Czech, and were being forced to speak German in their schools. And so in Bohemia, the issue of whether schools should use the Czech or German language really started to become a sticky issue. Here in the United States, you know, even if you're moving here from a different area, say China or wherever, Latin America, it doesn't matter where you come from, the expectation is that over time, you will have to learn English, okay? English as a cultural phenomenon in America is an important thing. Schools in America teach their subjects in English. Now, I do understand that there are those programs of what do they call that? There's a name for them, like dual immersion programs. That's what it's called, dual immersion, where kids are taught Spanish in schools from a young age so that they become proficient in a second language. And there's a lot of great things about that. How wonderful from the time that you're 10 years old to be fluent in Spanish. Boy, I wish I was, I'll tell you that right now. However, the other side of that argument is that a lot of kids who go through the entire education system in English are still not really considered literate in English, never mind a second language. And so, there are already problems surrounding the English language in the American education system that need to be fixed before, I would say, adding on a second language to complicate things. That being said, the kids that go to dual immersion schools are usually of a better socioeconomic background and so on and so forth, and this contributes to other problems of disparity of wealth and opportunity and access to education. So it's a complex issue, and there's no right or wrong answer necessarily, but the issue of language in schools is a big deal culturally, and it came onto the national level in the Austro-Hungarian Empire during this time. Efforts by both conservatives and socialists to diffuse, and that should actually say diffuse, national antagonisms by stressing economic issues proved unsuccessful. Universal male suffrage didn't come into the Austro-Hungarian Empire until 1907, which meant that a lot of people were disenfranchised from participating in the Austro-Hungarian political system. Another problem that we see starting to emerge significantly in Eastern Europe at this time is a problem known as anti-Semitism, which essentially is anti-Jewish. Anti-Semitism is absolutely profound in Austria. It had been for some time, actually, going back hundreds of years, in all of Eastern Europe. Not just the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but also Russia, the Ottoman Empire, many places in the Balkans, and other areas as well, Germany. And let's face it, to be honest with you, America even had its own problem with anti-Semitism at the turn of the 20th century, right around the year 1900. Many notable American businessmen, political figures were very, very outwardly discriminatory, prejudicial against Jewish folks. Henry Ford, Walt Disney, Joe Kennedy, JFK's dad, prominent American politicians, statesmen, businessmen, authors, you name it, were very hostile towards Jewish people. Reason being, in part, nationalism. Because nationalism throughout the later 1800s, as we've been learning about, nationalism becomes increasingly tied to conservatism, and the conservative powers in these nation states that are coalescing and strengthening and centralizing around a central national identity of the people means that people who don't match that ethnic identity of, let's say, American or German or Austrian or Russian or whatever, such as Jewish people, start to be viewed as outsiders. And so during this age of nationalism, as people begin to view themselves as a nation of people superior to foreigners, this means that people of ethnic minorities, such as Jewish folks, who live all over the planet start to be viewed as leeching off of the national infrastructure of the rest of the country. And so the anti-Semitic and racist views that folks had against Jewish people start to become more pronounced during the age of nationalism, as Jewish folks were a tight-knit community with different cultural practices. They spoke different languages, they went to different churches, and the other side of it is that many Jewish business people, in particular in Austria, were quite successful in banking and trade, while at the same time Jewish artists, intellectuals, and scientists began emerging at this time, which also was a threat to folks who were not Jewish of different ethnic majorities of the nation states that are starting to develop at this time. And so in Russia, for example, you have pogroms, P-O-G-R-O-M-S. Pogroms are overt displays of violence, lynchings, beatings, just generalized terror executed against Jewish communities, who of course make up the ethnic, a very small ethnic minority. In Austria, there's more. In Austria, about 10% of the population was Jewish. But in other places, they make up less than 2 or even 1% of the population, which means that they become a very easy target to blame problems of the state on, which the most famous example of that, without question, is Adolf Hitler in the years leading up to World War II, who launched a massive anti-Semitic campaign, passing laws, discriminatory laws against Jewish folks, and ultimately those laws progressed into what became the Holocaust. And so these anti-Jewish attitudes are very significant by the time that we move into the 1860s, 1870s, and they get worse over time. So Sigmund Freud, famous Austrian psychologist, he was actually a physician, but got best known for his theories surrounding psychology in the 1910s, 20s, 30s. He was Jewish, and this is one of several Jewish figures who emerged during this time. And the fact of the matter is that whether you were in Britain or America or Germany or Austria or Russia, Jewish folks, by most people in those places, were viewed as not being of the ethnic majority. They were viewed as different, they were viewed as inferior, and they were frequently blamed for troubles of the state and discriminated against as a result. And these are the kinds of things that we need to remember so that they don't happen again. German extremists began charging Jews with controlling the economy, corrupting German culture with alien ideas and ultra-modern art. And again, those attitudes once again resurfaced during the years of the Great Depression, where Jews became the target of German hostility for all of the economic problems Germany was facing during the Great Depression as Adolf Hitler was securing his rise to power. Magyar rule, the Hungarian rule in Hungary. Magyar nobility in 1867 had gone back to the 1848 constitution that had got briefly passed during the revolutions of 1848 before the Austrians and the Russians ended that revolution and reversed the constitution that had been written at that time. But in 1867, they go back to that constitution, they pull it back out, dust it off, and they use it to dominate both the Magyar peasantry as well as the minority populations of the Hungarian regions of Austria-Hungary all the way up until 1914. And under that constitution, only 25% of the wealthiest adult males had the right to vote, once again being very disinclusive of the vast majority of the population, which many times included ethnic minorities that were not Magyar in the first place. Laws promoting the use of Magyar Hungarian language in schools and government were especially resented by Croatians and Romanians, who felt like they should have the ability to teach in their schools, in their regions, in their own language, not having to abide by the rules of the Hungarians. So even to this day, Hungarians and Romanians, in many cases, there's a bitter rivalry between the two of them. For example, in soccer and just in general nationalist pride. But the Romanians and the Hungarians typically do not get along very well with one another. After 1871, the Habsburg leadership lost the initiative to resolve the empire's important divisive issues, and unlike most major countries at this time, Britain, Germany, Germany and Italy, of course, only recently going through their unification movements, which purposefully utilized conservative nationalism to bring those states into a unified sovereign territory. Unlike those places, which used nationalism to strengthen the state after 1871, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is progressively weakened and ultimately, by the end of World War I in 1918, completely destroyed by nationalism. Folks, that is where I wanted to get to, which is the end of this PowerPoint today. Going into next week, just to give you a little bit of a heads up of stuff that's going to happen. Let's see here. Let me fix this so that you can see me again. Just letting you know some things that are going to happen here coming up. Test Wednesday. Test Wednesday on this material. Monday, we will finish talking about some stuff that happens in Britain after the 1850s, 1860s. We're going to look a little bit at that stuff on Monday. Because I know that you've had some questions in your reading guide about it that I haven't yet had the opportunity to lecture on, but I will be doing that on Monday. We will finish the unit on Monday, and we will be looking to test on Age of Isms, conservatism, all that sort of stuff, revolutions of 1848, and then German-Italian unification and Age of Real Politics. So those are going to be the major topics for this test on Wednesday of next week. We may do a little bit of review of some of that if we have the time on Monday as well. But I will be putting up, I haven't had the chance to do it because I've been lecturing all morning here without a break, but on today after class, I'm going to be posting a new assignment for the reading guide to try to get that finished up by the time we take the test. And outside of that, I think that pretty well does it for me. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, you are dismissed and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.